This is not my line. This is her night line. Her line. It's fight night bitches.
September 3rd, 2003. 7 black Buicks pulled up in front of your BALCO laboratories. Where were you? What were you doing? Just what happened that day for you?
Well, let me say that infamous BALCO raid that took place September 3rd, 2003 was not a surprise to me. They had been going through my trash on a weekly basis for an entire year, ever since August of 2002.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was that shortly before the raid, we got a call from the owner of a building over the freeway, and he said, "Hey, you guys need to stop putting your BALCO trash in my dumpster for my building, or I'm going to call the cops." I said, "Listen, it's not us. We're not taking the trash, and we're not putting it over there. Somebody, likely law enforcement, is stealing our trash." So eventually, they kept doing it. Jeff Nowitzki my understanding is he would take it home, look through it, and then discard it. First, he was putting it in the high school bin where he went to school there at Mills High School. And then they caught him doing that, and then he was going to start doing it at the building across the street. And so when he called and the office manager came and said, "Well, they're dumping, BALCO trash over here in this building again," I said, "Call the cops and file a report."
Yeah.
So they called the cops. They came out. We told them, we thought it was law enforcement. They wrote up an article in a little free newspaper called the Boutiquan Villager, the Burlingame Boutiquan Villager. I found out later that this is the town where Nowitzki lives, right off of El Camino. And every one of these papers, they delivered to your house for free. Well, this is where he likely read this article and recognized, hey, they're on to me.
Oh, no.
I already knew. So did I know that they were coming? The answer is yes, I knew that they were coming. And of course, that morning, we just got back from the World Championships in Paris, and Kelly White had won double gold, the sprint queen, 100 meter, 200 meter gold medals. And so I came back, and then I came in that morning, and then Joyce said, there's all these guys that are out there putting these flak jackets on and dressing up and all these, fatigues. And she said, but a lot of times guys train at the World's Gym where Barry Bonds trained right around the corner. So it wasn't that unusual for us to see this sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I came back around 12 o'clock, and at exactly 12:21, all across, the BALCO was on a corner. So it was all floor to ceiling glass. And you had to walk through the main office to get to my office. And I was standing there talking to somebody by the fax machine. And I looked out, and all of a sudden, plowing into the driveway was the first one. Then another one came in, and it was on a corner, and it would just screech, 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 about 6 or 7 Buicks. There were a total of 26 IRS and other special agents, customs, and all the rest of it. And so I'm looking at all this and just, I was like frozen. And the next thing you know, here comes crashing through the door, federal agents. Anybody got any weapons? And they come through the door, and I see all these guns being pointed at me, and they go, over here, sit down. And they sat the 3 of us down in chairs and kind of surrounded us in a half moon. They're holding assault rifles. And so they went around all the rooms. It was a 7,000 square foot building, and they labeled every room A, B, C, D, E, F, G, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And so while we're sitting there, a helicopter comes right over the top of the very front door, and up above the door there were actually glass louvers going across, and one of them shattered from the vibration of the helicopter.
Oh, from the helicopter?
And then I looked, and I had a silver Mercedes at the time that was parked right outside the door, and then here comes CBS, ABC, NBC, all these trucks, all these satellites going up. Of course, it was that night. That footage was all over the world.
Oh, February 13th, which was Friday the 13th, 2004. That was the day that you were indicted on 42 counts. The U.S. Attorney, John Ashcroft, Ashcroft was the one that announced it. How he's the U.S. attorney. Your case went all the way up that high?
Well, if you remember, that same month or very close to that time is when George W. Bush gave the talk, the State of the Union address, and he talked about steroids and our children and Major League Baseball, and we have to protect and so on.
Well, that was you then, about you.
Well, they were talking about me and why they decided. I have my own theory. I'll tell you what it is. That I believe that the reason they made such a big deal of the BALCO case was to use that as a distraction from the Iraq War. When they went in, if you know, all this stuff now that's come out about the vice president, and he had worked for Halliburton, and they were supplying all this equipment for the war, and it turns out that they didn't find any chemicals of mass destruction. Yet at that same time, here comes the public enemy number one named Victor Conte, who's the fall guy, who's destroying all of our kids' future and single-handedly destroying Major League Baseball, the Dr. Frankenstein, the Saddam Hussein of sport. All of a sudden, why would they notify the media that they were going to raid my laboratory, have CBS, NBC, ABC, all these trucks there waiting down the street, which is illegal to do this, and notify people in advance, mind you. Two minutes after they crashed in the door, here's a helicopter, which they claimed in their filings that they didn't have anything to do with the helicopter, but yet it was a company named HeliNet. And when you went to look at their website, the first thing that they touted was the fact that they had transported 9 United States presidents. Of course it was connected with the government, and they weren't telling the truth. So next thing you know, here's this massive scandal. And of course they saw Barry Bonds, Marion Jones, all these world-class athletes, and they knew that this was going to be a big, big story. Well, that night, it was all over the world. It was on CNN. This was a massive story that here's this guy. And I guess what they saw was that BALCO was like an octopus with all the tentacles going out, that I was in every sport at the elite level: tennis, swimming, basketball, baseball, football, track and field, boxing. And so they realized with these kind of names that this was going to be a massive story. So thereafter, look at the money that they spent flying in 40, I repeat, 40 world-class athletes. They indicted me, and we'll talk about that later, but it took 6 months from September 3rd until February the 13th for them to bring the 42-count indictment. I still don't understand why, because ultimately you know that I pled to sharing a testosterone prescription, and without cooperating at all in any way, shape, or form and accepting full consequences, I got 4 months in a minimum security prison. Now, they had said that I was a modern day Al Capone, that I was going to prison for 30 years. It was on the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle, all of which was not true.
They had 40 world-class athletes. Did any of them reach out to you and say, are you going to rat me out? Are you going to say something? Are you going to disclose the relationship that we had? Or because a lot of people now say that you're a rat.
There were a couple dummies that called me.
and they're tracing their calls and listening.
You might imagine that what I would say is, listen, whatever you do, tell the truth. Okay? I mean, I don't know what they would be thinking about. From the moment that happened, I assumed that they were listening to everything that I did. They raided my home. They raided my lab. They came back and raided my home a second time. So I assumed my entire house was bugged. So there were times when my wife and I would have to go out in the backyard and stand in the middle of the yard and whisper to each other, just thinking we might have some privacy. Because I've been raided with SWAT teams 3 times. They came back a year later when Troy Ellerman leaked the grand jury transcript to a San Francisco Chronicle writer, and for some reason they thought it was me, and of course it turned out that it had nothing to do with me. But They came and raided my house, raided my office, took all my computers, all of my files, violated all my Second Amendment, Sixth Amendment rights. I mean, I had, so why they were able to do this, I don't know. But at the end of the whole thing, it turned out that it was not me.